Hola, bona tarda. Soc la Marga Gómez, soc gestora d'aquí de Caixa Fòrum Macaya i en nom del qual us dono la benvinguda. Si m'ho permeteu, ara pel fet que estem emetent aquest acte en streaming, pasaré a parlar en castellà y dar la bienvenida a las más de 50 personas que en estos momentos están conectados en streaming. Siguiendo la línea de ciclos de pensamiento, hoy damos comienzo a un nuevo ciclo de diálogos, nudos de la democracia, coordinado por el Observatorio Social de la Fundación La Caixa y la Fundación Ernest Lluch. Son 8 sesiones que hemos planificado cada jueves hasta el 24 de noviembre, en el que debatiremos y reflexionaremos sobre los grandes nudos democráticos que identificaremos a lo largo de todo el ciclo. Gracias, como siempre, por vuestra asistencia, por vuestro interés. Y sin más, cedo la palabra al señor Joan Mayó, que es el presidente de la Fundación Ernest Lluch. Gracias.
Bona tarda a tothom. Gràcies. Vaig a canviar de llengua perquè m'entenguin les dues. Hoy hacemos dos cosas. Inauguramos un ciclo y hacemos un primer diálogo. Por tanto, de alguna forma, tendría que repetir una bienvenida por las dos cosas. Pero vaya, benvinguts, bienvenidos, welcome. Estem molt contents, estamos muy contentos en la Fundación de poder, después de todos estos tiempos que hemos pasado, entrar en un nuevo ciclo y hacerlo una vez más con la colaboración del Observatorio Social, al que una vez más doy las gracias en nombre de la Fundación. Vale la pena que nos demos cuenta, y es la única reflexión que hago en estas palabras iniciales, de que estamos entrando en una etapa nueva de la historia de la humanidad. Estamos entrando en una época nueva. Recordad lo que fue la revolución agraria, recordad lo que fue la revolución industrial y pensad lo que puede ser la revolución tecnológica. Yo estoy convencido de que muchas cosas que sirvieron para las anteriores etapas no servirán para la próxima etapa y tenemos la necesidad y la obligación de pensarlo. No voy a hacer yo la presentación, lo va a hacer una persona que las conoce mucho más, Ana Terrón, y lo que sí quiero decir es que el funcionamiento de estos diálogos, muchos ya los conocéis y por lo tanto vamos a seguir el mismo sistema de siempre. Muchísimas gracias. Ana, por favor.
Hola, buenas tardes y bienvenidas. Yo voy a ser breve, todo lo breve que me permita explicar quién son las dos dialogantes que tenemos hoy, cuyos currículums son extensos. Yo creo que empezar este ciclo hablando de la nueva geopolítica y de las opciones de la democracia europea es acertar en el corazón de algo que debe preocuparnos en el sentido de que debe mantenernos expectantes y activos en este momento, porque creo que es un poco la clave de hacia dónde vayan las cosas en un momento en que están no en una, sino en varias encrucijadas. Pero lo van a explicar en su diálogo mucho mejor que yo, así que ahora quiero simplemente explicarles quiénes son, aunque de sobras la mayoría de ustedes lo saben. A Arancha, González, Laya, lo primero que tengo que decir es que ha sido mi jefa y amiga. Y eso no siempre es fácil. Pues ha sido mi jefa y amiga. Arancha es licenciada en Derecho por la Universidad de Navarra y máster en Derecho Europeo por la Universidad Carlos III de Madrid. En este momento es decana de la Escuela de Asuntos Internacionales de París Sciences Po, el PSIA que tienen ahí lo identificarán mejor como Sciences Po. Fue ministra de Asuntos Exteriores, Unión Europea y Cooperación en el Gobierno de España, en el actual Gobierno, y es además la tercera decana de Sciences Po y la primera mujer que dirige esta institución, que es la tercera escuela de política y estudios internacionales del mundo. Arancha, antes de incorporarse a su posición actual en la Escuela de Asuntos Internacionales en París, fue secretaria general adjunta de Naciones Unidas, directora ejecutiva del Centro de Comercio Internacional. Entre 2005 y 2013 ejerció como jefe de gabinete del director de la Organización Mundial del Comercio, Pascal Lamy. Anteriormente estuve en la Comisión Europea, que yo creo que nos conocimos por ahí, en las áreas de comercio internacional y de desarrollo, y decir que además empezó su carrera haciendo de abogado en el sector privado. Creo que estamos en excelentes manos para empezar a hablar de la nueva geopolítica y de Europa, y a mí me gustaría dejar una pequeña pregunta o una pequeña palabra ya aquí, y se refiere a la cumbre que ha habido hoy en Praga, a esa Europa, ¿no?, más amplia. Me gustaría tener vuestra opinión sobre esto. Gracias. Sylvie Kauffmann, es un placer tenerte en Barcelona, de verdad. Es la directora editorial y columnista del diario Le Monde. Actualmente Richard von Weizsäcker, si lo he dicho bien, Fellow de la Fundación Robert Bosch en Berlín. Es la directora editorial y columnista en Le Monde, para quien escribe una columna semanal sobre asuntos globales. Sus artículos de opinión sobre política europea e internacional han aparecido durante muchísimos años en The New York Times y ahora escribe para el Financial Times. Fue la primera mujer redactora en Le Monde. Ocupó este cargo, además, durante la colaboración entre El País, The Guardian y el New York Times sobre Wikileaks. Ha informado sobre Asia y desde Asia, sobre Europa del Este y de Estados Unidos y desde allí. Y en Estados Unidos escribió una serie de artículos premiada sobre la vida en Estados Unidos después de los atentados del 11 de septiembre. Ha sido corresponsal en Moscú, Varsovia, Washington, Nueva York y Singapur, y lo dejo aquí porque creo que eso nos abre ya directamente el apetito de escucharos y de saber qué tenéis que deciros. Yo creo que este formato de la Fundación Ernest Lluch, y gracias por organizar esto, es excelente para ir provocándose mutuamente, y sabéis qué es lo que os toca hacer ahora. Gràcies. El resto de los assistents podreu intervenir anotant en un paper que us han donat les preguntes que tingueu, que després seran traslladades convenientment a les nostres dialogants. Gràcies.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes. I will start. Thank you very much for this introduction, and I just want to say how happy and proud I am to be here. And so this is a format I'm not very familiar with, but fortunately it is with Arancha. So I think we'll just imagine that we're in a cafe in Paris, or we had lunch once, and we can just imagine that we are having this discussion. and maybe try to forget that you are so many of you here. But because we love to have these discussions about the situation and this conversation. And I don't know about Spain, but in France, as you know, everybody has become an expert on geopolitics now, or a commentator on geopolitics. We had those experts on COVID, many of them, and now there's this passion for geopolitics, which I'm very happy about, except that it's not for good reason. It's because this situation we are faced with today is so complex and tragic in many respects. And I will just go back 30 years because I have a very fond and strong memories of what happened. I was lucky enough to be a witness of the collapse of communism in Moscow and in Central Europe, in Warsaw, in Budapest, in all those countries which were, waking up one after the other, and particularly Poland, I have to say, which had because we all remember about the Berlin Wall, but of course it started earlier particularly in Poland, and it was a long march, if I may say, from the Polish people to resist. So the thing I remember most about that era is the hope. Yeah, the immense hope. I mean, this admiration for these people who had been fighting so hard against authoritarianism and dictatorship, and they just wanted freedom, they wanted democracy, and we all thought that it was there, and we just had to be happy with it. And of course then it was a bit difficult to build democracy and the transition to market economy in those countries, because what they had been experiencing was so different. But they had the will to do it, and then we opened the door of the European Union, and so it was supposed to go this way, right? And now 30 years later we have this terrible situation, both in that part of Europe, but also in our part of Europe, with the rise of populist and forces and far right. So I guess one thing which is going to keep us busy today is how did we get here? So this is the first thing I would like you to start with, maybe, is what is your analysis, your explanation? How did we get here?
It's first of all, thank you very much, Sylvie. I mean, you and I work closely on many things, and we talk to each other and we meet in lots of places, but it's particularly pleasant to do this dialogue without anybody else, just you and I, here in Barcelona, and to do this in this foundation that carries the name of a man, Ernest Lluch, that for me, being a child of many of the policies he pushed for in this country, including universal healthcare, is particularly dear to my heart. But you're right. I was in university when the Berlin Wall fell, and I don't have. I've seen the images and I've seen the hope, but my contact with this reality comes a little bit later. When Putin is trying to get Russia to be part of the international community, when Putin wants Russia to be a very important player in the existing international order, when he wants Russia to be a member of the World Trade Organization.
So that's what?
2000, that's right, 2003, 2004, 2002. I used to go with as part of the European Commission team that was negotiating the accession. And this was a very different Putin. He wanted Russia to be a big country in the existing order. And he wanted Russia to be part of a big economic space that would go from Vladivostok to London. Remember this big dream of the community that would bind Russia and the entire European continent. This was not a dream. this is where we were working. As we were working with China to also become a member of the international economic order. And it was the European Union and the Americans, the United States, they were doing this together. But you know, Sylvie, I think along the way, 3 things happened. And I don't think that Europe paid enough attention to these 3 things. And I wanted to put this for your own consideration. First, at some point, Putin decided he did not want Russia to be part of the international order. He wanted to break the international order. The order was a threat to Russia. The second thing that happened was our ally, the United States, the benevolent hegemon and the system, decided to start retreating from the international order. It felt a burden to be this guardian of the system it had contributed to set up. And the third thing that happened, and this is also worrying, is that the Chinese leadership exchanged the economy for ideology. So Deng Xiaoping, that I knew from this time, that was very big on the economy, has been replaced by Xi Jinping, that it's not about the economy, it's back to ideology. So a more nationalist country. So the 3 big parts of our universe have changed, but we did not realize that the changes were happening, and we did not adjust accordingly. Now, I don't know whether this is a fair assessment or whether you think that we are missing something with this analysis.
I think you're right that those 3 things did happen, and they were important factors, absolutely. I would add that we, I don't want to say that it's all our fault, because if Putin is a dictator, I do think that Putin was a dictator from the beginning, that we know how he got to power and the things he did before. I mean, after all, he was a KGB colonel in Eastern Germany. So, it's not like he was a fantastic, a true Democrat who suddenly became, no. There was something in his identity and his political shaping that leads to the situation today. But you're right, he did try to approach the West. I watched some time ago for the research I'm doing in Berlin at the moment. I watched the speech he gave in the Bundestag in 2001. It was in September, end of September 2001. He came to the Bundestag, to Germany, on an official visit, so he was president for not even a year, and he gave a speech in German. And it's interesting to watch it on YouTube, because you see his demeanor, his body language. He's almost touching. He's still young. He's thin. He behaves in a humble way. And so all these German MPs completely fall for it. It's they're standing ovation. They are so happy, because the German-Russian relationship is, of course, a very complex relationship. And so they are so happy, because they think this is, really the end of the Cold War. Now we can be friends. And there's this guy who is doing an opening to us, and we're going to grab it. And there's one guy in one corner. I mean, he's an MP, he's at the Bundestag, but he's not getting up, he's not applauding, he's stone-faced, and that's Joschka Fischer. Yeah, watch it, you will see, it's quite funny. And so I met Joschka Fischer, and I asked him, why didn't you take part in this, common enthusiasm? And he said, I didn't trust him. And he said, I said, why? He said, because of Chechnya, because he was the foreign minister. And so I think he had met him before. I mean, I know he had met him before in April or so. And I asked him, so what was this meaning? He said, oh, too long ago, I don't remember. I don't know if it's true. But anyway, he had very early this impression that the real Vladimir Putin. Now, we were right to try, I think. Going back to your first factor, we were right to try, but then we became too naive or too greedy, depending on the countries. Yeah, I think the French were probably too naive in their grand dreams of reorganizing the security of Europe, and the Germans were maybe naive, but also greedy. They saw that it was really a big market, a big place for investment, and also a very good gas provider for cheap gas. So I think over the years, and we can find other factors, of course, but I think this is something today we have to reflect on. Why did we behave this way? Why were we, Georgia 2008, Crimea, we'll probably talk about it in 2014. And we took some sanctions, and I would like to ask you what you think about these sanctions. Were they strong enough or not? I mean, could we have been tougher or more complacent, less complacent? Could it have changed the course of things?
You see, I think, and this is very specific of Europe, I think what we are is precisely about trying to create a different way of behaving nationally and internationally. The European Union is created as a result of the wars of aggression, the violation of territorial integrity, of sovereignty over decades. So we are born as a result, as a project against this way of conducting politics, and as a way to organize international relations in a different way. You know, when I talk to many of my friends around the world, they say, we don't understand all this fuss about Ukraine. There are lots of wars around the world. There is lots of killing around the world, and you do not react in the same way. And I have to explain to them that for us in Europe, this is a very intimate wound, because it's violating what we were meant to avoid. And I think this is also, in addition to naiveness or greediness, I think there is also this idea that we had, because this is who we are, that we could, in a way, manage the relationships with a neighbor that was uncomfortable from the very beginning, in a different way than just going to war with this neighbor. And this is why this war is so atrocious for us, because we wake up to realize that it is there, that the war is there, that all the things that we did, granted, partly probably not as tough as they should have been, but I attribute this also not just to naiveness and greediness, but also to almost wanting to reivindicate who we are and our way of doing things in a different way. Now, what we've learned from this exercise is that first, there is no antidote against the imperial folliness. There is no antidote against, wanting individuals wanting to violate other countries. So I think we have to continue to reivindicate our way of thinking, our way of behaving, our idea that we are a peace project. But we now have to learn to defend this peace project in a much more muscular manner than we have done until now. I don't think we should turn the EU into a war project. This is not who the EU is. We need to continue to be a peace project. But today we know that we have to be much more alert and be much more muscular in defending our peace project, including with weapons if this is necessary, including through war, or if it is necessary to defend ourselves and defend our way of being. And I don't know, it's very tough, Sylvie, and I don't know how, because, I mean, is this now, many citizens in Europe are asking themselves, is this now about turning the EU into a war project? Should we now become, you know, abandon this hope of building society from a peaceful beginning?
I think it's Sigmar Gabriel, the former economy and foreign minister of Germany, who used to say, "We Europeans, we are vegetarians in a world of carnivores." Yeah.
Well.
So we have to eat more meat, though it's not fashionable at all at the moment. But maybe we are. But yes, and I think we also have to, you know, I believe very much in the power of example, and I think we've also erred on this, particularly our American friends, but also ourselves in Europe. And to the list of factors that you started at the beginning, and we shouldn't be too negative, but I think we'll turn to a more positive in a moment, to a more positive mood. I think, of course, the Iraqi War, and then the financial crisis. This has done so much damage to all of us. I mean, of course, to the United States. But yeah, the Iraqi War, I mean, this country also took part, yeah. We still live with the consequences of that war, of that occupation, of that invasion. So this, you know, now when we go to the UN and to the global south, as we call it now, to the rest of the world, saying, look, you have to support us or to support Ukraine because this is about democracy and freedom and international law and the rules-based order, international order. And they say, yeah, but what about, you know, what about what you did 20 years ago or almost, and what about double standards? And this is a big problem. And the financial crisis in it's interesting because 2008 is a very important, a year in a way, because so many things happened on that year. I mentioned the war in Georgia, which for me was really a turning point in Russia, in Russia's attitude and in Putin's imperialist design. And there was this financial crisis which started and which really did so much damage to the credit of capitalism and market economy and financial economy, right? And also 2008 was the Olympic Games in Beijing. I happened to be there at that time. I spent the month, several weeks in Beijing at that time because Le Monde was doing a special operation about China for these Olympics. And I think it's the moment where China really showed the world how powerful it was becoming. We knew that, you know, economic growth and that it was becoming a big economic engine, but I think then we realized that it also wanted to be a big power on the world scene. And so, right, in the things that we missed, I think and that we can fix now probably with a lot of efforts, but if we want, we probably can improve it, is to stop these double standards and show, you know, that we mean what we say, as the Americans say, that we talk the talk and we walk the walk, right? What do you think?
No, totally right. And this is why, I mean, many countries around the world, when we ask them now, please side with us and against Russia, first they grin. They have a bit of schadenfreude, you know? Oh, it's happening to you now. But also, I think they feel strongly that there is a case of double standards. Now, there is a case of double standards, and we know that there are many conflicts around the world that are stuck and there is no enough political attention internationally to address them. And, you know, we have a few in the vicinity of the European Union, you know, whether it's Palestine, whether it's Western Sahara. There are many conflicts that are frozen and don't get the necessary attention. They do not get the necessary political energy. We have to make sure that we also put political energy in these conflicts. Thus is how we will be able to build a bit more partnership around the world. But I wanted to go back to the financial crisis of 2008, because it had, for a country like China, it was a big test case of the failures of capitalism. But if we look inside the European Union, this was also a crucial moment when we started eroding the faith of many Europeans in the European Union. The manner in which the EU managed the 2008 financial crisis led to a lot of the political polarization that still is with us, that is pushing public opinions in the European Union to the extremes, to the extreme right, to the extreme left. It's emptying the center, which is where you can make compromises. Because at the end of the day, managing our economy, addressing inequalities, decarbonizing our economies requires compromises. And the polarization that still is with us, and is to a large extent, it's many things, but there is a big input of the 2008 financial crisis, should always be this warning signal that if we want to avoid that, we've got to do it differently. Which is why this is a big argument that we used in this country during the COVID crisis, to say, let's not do again what we did in 2008. But my sense, Sylvie, is that we are still digesting the 2008 financial crisis in the political systems of our member states. I don't know, I mean, we've had some recent elections around Europe, including in the country that you know best, that is telling us that there is a red warning light there.
Yeah. No, it is a huge concern, and it started with Brexit, which was really a shock, I think, to all of us, and I will go back to what Anna asked us about the conference in Prague, because that might be a positive thing which happened today. It started with Brexit, then we had Trump, and then, actually it didn't start with Brexit, I think it started with Poland, right? In 2015, when this nationalist, very conservative party was elected democratically, right? And then we had, of course, Orban also, who was there, I forgot, since 2010. But yeah, certainly we were surrounded or faced with all these nationalist, ultra-conservative or populist. Sometimes they are not all the same, right? They have some nuances and differences, but they are all part of the same trend. So we really have to fight this, because there is, as we see in France and in Italy now, there is this banalization, normalization of the far right. We now have 89 MPs of the Rassemblement National in France. It's a big part of the parliament, and they are behaving very well. Marine Le Pen told them to behave well, to wear a tie and suits, and not to be completely out of control as the far left. And so it's a big problem, because now they have access to public financing as a political party which has 89 members of parliament. They have access to staff. That was one of their big weaknesses. They didn't have good, competent people. Now they have people from the administration of the parliament who can work with them. And they have access to legislative work. So it's a real issue, and we have it for 5 years, so probably. And in Italy now, we have this situation with Fratelli d'Italia and Mrs. Meloni. So, yeah, I think this is one of our big challenges. And about Brexit, yeah, today in Prague there was this new group which met on, originally it's an initiative from President Macron, yeah, from May, he proposed this in the month of May, and so I don't know what it. I would like to have your impression about where it might lead, but the fact is that there were 44 countries meeting together, and that Liz Truss, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, came, which is a very positive sign. I think that she wants to re-engage with at least the continent, maybe with the EU, we'll see, but that they don't want to be so isolated on their island anymore. They want to be part of this community. So, and Ukraine was represented by a message. Of course, he couldn't move, he couldn't travel. President Zelensky, Erdogan was there also. And so, and I read that Josep Borrell on his blog, he said, we need to rethink and reform the wider European order beyond the work of the EU and NATO. So I don't know what you think of this. What does this mean? I don't know if you know how to interpret Borrell's thoughts, but you have an opinion, I'm sure.
I would not venture to read Borrell's mind, but what I can tell you, Sylvie, is a bit of a secret, but I've been working together with a few people.
We're just among us here, yeah.
I've been working together with a few others from Sciences Po, with a group of universities across Europe and the think tank of Jacques Delors, and a group of think tanks around Europe, to give backing to this idea.
Great.
So why?
So you believe in it?
I believe in it. Because right now, what we have is to redefine the geopolitical space called Europe. Not EU. The EU has a lot of work to do, and we'll talk about this now. The EU wants to be more strategically autonomous. It wants to be more capable of making its own decisions. Let's park this discussion for a moment. We'll come back to it. But we've got the EU, we've got Europe, and we've got the rest of the world. So Europe is the European Union. Europe is a group of countries that want to become members of the European Union. But Europe is also a group of countries that don't want to be part of the European Union, but are part of Europe. Now, how was Europe organized in the past? With two big forces, Russia and the United States. It is time Europe organizes itself.
I agree.
It does it because it wants to show that it can work to identify the big challenges facing security in Europe: energy security, physical security, prosperity, security of borders. It wants to make sure that it has a shared understanding and can build a shared solution. You know, Sylvie, this moment makes me think of 2008 and the birth of the G20.
That's another thing in
2008, big crisis. The world didn't know what to do. The existing structures were not enough. The bank was good, the fund was good, the UN was good, but it was not enough. So the G20 was born as a means to give a shared diagnostic and shared backing to a set of solutions. Well, right now we've got a similar moment in Europe. It's Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the answer is some sort of G-Europe.
G-Europe, that's a good
44 countries
that's a good
that are diverse. Maybe it will help normalize relations with the UK. Maybe it will help reconcile Swiss with the fact that they live in the European continent. I've lived for a long time in Switzerland, but Switzerland is Europe. It may not be European Union, but it's Europe. We've got Turkey. We don't know what to do with Turkey. This is a good opportunity to build this more togetherness in Europe by Europeans. This, to me, is very important, that we take our own destiny in our hands, that we do not let others define what we are, who we are.
Yeah, but so that's great. But how do you see, since you have worked on this project, how do you see it evolving? Like the equivalent of G20? I mean, without, because we don't know whether there's going to be a structure, whether, you know, it's not supposed to be a new institution, right? So just a community. It's called Communauté Politique Européenne, yeah? European Political Community.
Yeah. Well, we Europeans immediately think institutions, you know?
Right, yeah.
All right, so we've got this thing called European Political Community. Let's build an institution around it. Who's going to be the secretariat? What are the rules of decision-making? Where will the secretariat sit? How are we going to make decisions? Who's going to decide who comes in or who is out? I think we have to learn to be a bit more flexible. For me, it would be enough that after this meeting today, they decide to meet again.
Yeah.
With an agenda that would come from today's discussion. Today they discussed security and defense. We need to redefine a security order in Europe. Security and defense, economic, energy, migration. Good set of things. For me, it would be good enough that they agree that it is good to continue with this format and give it a bit more flesh. But we have to be careful because the most important thing is that this is about Europe. And we have to keep bringing this forward. And there is a lot of mistrust. I've been, I tweeted this picture of all these 44 leaders. I said, this is Europe. And then I immediately got lots of replies on my Twitter.
Negative?
No, lots of British tweets saying, why is Liz Truss in the second row?
Wow.
You see? So there is a lot of mistrust. This mistrust is what we have to deal with. And if this political community helps us build trust between countries in Europe, in my view, it would be very good. So I don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's one thing which I liked. It's so the idea. I don't know whether they have agreed on this, but the idea was to have this community meet every 6 months, right? And one venue. The first time would be in a EU country, and the next time in a non-EU country, and so. The idea was the next one, the second one will be in Moldova, which I don't know how Moldova will organize this, but I think it's a great idea. And apparently, and then it would have to be an EU country, and apparently the British would like to be the fourth one. So that would be really fun, yeah. But you talk about mistrust, and that's also something which worries me. It's this mistrust which is developing because of the war between Western Europe and not all Eastern Europe, but let's say Poland, the Baltic countries, Sweden probably, I would say. Mostly. I think the Czech and Slovaks are are more cautious. Hungary, let's put it aside at the moment, but we can see there's a real deep divide on the future, particularly on Russia, of course, and on what's going to happen. And so we have to add Ukraine to this because we hope Ukraine will win the war, but and it's supposed to join the EU at some stage. I don't know. I would like to have your opinion on how long it could take. But we have a bloc there, which has so much suffered from the Soviet Union and from Russia's attitude that it's completely blocked and negative. And I was in Kiev 3 weeks ago, and there was a discussion about collective responsibility, whether the people from the Baltic states and from Poland and from Ukraine were saying, but, it's not Putin's war, it's Russia's war, it's the Russians' war. They're all guilty. And the problem is that the Soviet Union never had to answer for its crimes, and now we're paying for it. This is the situation we're in now because we haven't. There has been denazification of Germany, but there's never been de-Sovietization, or I don't know how to say it. But I think there's a point there. But if you think about it seriously, there's a point. But where is it taking us? It's abysmal, right? It's a very difficult situation, thought, attitude, and I can see that France, Germany, probably Spain, Italy, we're looking at this and we say, oh no, we don't want to go there, but maybe we'll have to go there. What do you think?
Well, first on the relationship that you have with your history. I mean, you are in Spain, and I can tell you that this is a very open chapter in this country. And we could devote one of the next sessions to this issue. I think it is true that not dealing with your past haunts your future. And this is a reality. So this is why it's important to deal with your past. Now, the question is, how do you deal with your past? In the current case, I think the problem is less about the past and more about the fear of being left alone. First,
from the Central European countries.
Yeah, I wouldn't say from the Central European countries, Sylvie, because I think there is the East-West, but then there is the East, and the East is very diverse. First, the East had the Visegrad Group. I don't think the Visegrad Group exists any longer. It used to be 4 countries. Today is 1 + 1 + 2. There is Poland, there is Hungary, and then there is the Czech and the Slovak republics. And their perceptions of this situation is different.
Right.
Then you've got the Baltic states. And I would make a distinction between the Baltic states and Poland. Poland, it's arming itself. It feels so strong. It is big. But this is not the feeling in the Baltic states. These are 3 very small countries bordering Russia, with Russian minorities within their territories, with Russian territories within their territory. They feel more fragile.
So they were part of the Soviet Union.
They were part of the Soviet Union. They all were. But it feels much more daunting if you're sitting in a Baltic state than if you're sitting in the Czech Republic, in Hungary, and let's imagine even less so if you're sitting in Italy or in Spain or Portugal, because it's a function of your closeness and your personal and intimate relationship with the problem. Now, the question is, what's the answer? And the answer to me is much more unity within the Union and a clear commitment all along that this will be the EU. It will be the EU. Now, this has to reassure so that we don't do a race to impossible asks.
Yeah, but we cannot take everybody in the EU. Yeah, that's also the issue of enlargement.
No, but I mean unity within the EU member states, that Spain has to be sensitive, to put it in graphical terms, Spain has to be very sensitive about what happens in the Baltic states, and the Baltic states have to be very sensitive about the perceptions of risks in Spain. The perceptions of risks are different. But we have to build this trust that whatever is important to you, I'll take it seriously, whatever is important to me, you will take it seriously. Now, so far I would say that the way the EU member states have been working with the sanctions is, and have been trying to put together a response, a unity response, we should stress all the time, not that it's not enough, we should always stress that it is a unity response. I don't know what. I mean, you're sitting in Berlin now. I don't know how it looks like from when you look at it from Berlin.
It's the Germans. They are really in a mood of their own at the moment, because you were talking about history. So of course, for them, history, they have dealt with their past. If there's a country which has dealt with its past, it's really Germany in an incredible way. But it's not gone. Yeah, it's still, they still live with it. Even today's generations, it's very impressive. I mean, I have to say, it's nobody forgets, right? So, which is good in a way, yeah. But now they have to make such a move. In French, we say une mue. When an animal changes the skin. Yeah, I forgot in English how it's. But so they are really, about defense, about security, about energy. Of course, they have to change completely their policy of supply of energy supply. They are going to have, as all of us, they will have to go through this winter with new measures and so on. But the return of the war in Europe for Germans, I think, has more significance than for us or for you here. It's very heavy, and I think they have this debate at the moment about the tanks, about delivering tanks to Ukraine. They have this. We're not only becoming, all of us, experts in geopolitics, but also in armament equipment. So they have these big Leopard tanks, which apparently are excellent machinery, big, and so they don't, the Ukrainians are crying for those tanks, and the Germans say, and I think that Spain wanted to, Spain was ready to deliver some, and Germany stopped it, No, you tell me what happened.
No, I think we had a bit of a less performant tanks parked somewhere that we could contribute to, but we wanted to do this as a let's do this together.
Okay.
And I think this is where they are trying to work out how this is done together.
Yeah, it's interesting because at the moment France is delivering some new Caesar systems, cannon systems, with Denmark, together with Denmark. They were going to be delivered to Denmark, and Denmark has accepted to divert them to Ukraine, and so it's quite interesting, all this mechanism. But anyway, so the Germans, these tanks, it's not only a question that their armed forces will be left without tanks, and if they give them to the Ukrainians, I think it's also the image, the symbol of German tanks being back on a theater of war on the European continent. And there's something there which is difficult, So I forgot what was your question about German, how the Germans react to European unity. And I think the Germans, of course, they for them Europe is so important as for us, and it's vital, it's existential, but now they are also being asked to exercise leadership. And this is one of our problems in Europe also. It's who has the leadership. It's difficult to have a leadership of 27. You know better than I do because you've been there. And at some stage, somebody's got to lead the way. I think Ursula von der Leyen is not doing a bad job at the moment. She's taking quite an important role. But now and then, Germany is asked to lead. And they, again, because of their history, they have a big difficulty considering this, even for the term, because if you take the term in German, it's the same as the Führer. So they prefer the English word leadership. And but the concept itself is they understand that they should take more responsibility and so on. But it's I think against the weight of culture and history is important here.
But we don't realize, a foreign policy is the projection of your nightmares. A defense policy is the projection of your nightmares. So if you do not share the same nightmares, it's very difficult to have a common defense policy. What we have in Europe is the nightmares of Baltic states is Russian tanks in the streets. The nightmares in Berlin is German tanks in the Ukrainian territory. For us, it's a totally different nightmare. We're looking south. So you see, we need, if we want to build this trust that we were talking about, we have to start being clear about sharing the nightmares. Now, you were saying who's leading in Europe. And I think, you know, this is it's a very interesting question. We had this question, and Christina will remember this. We had this discussion when we built our own foreign policy strategy in Spain. And I remember putting on this foreign policy strategy that the European Union today works on variable geometry.
Right, sorry?
On variable geometry. That traditionally the European Union has an engine, is France and Germany. But that today the European Union needs more than France and Germany. At some times, when France is a bit of a laggard, and when Germany is a bit of a hesitant, you need others. You need to create this energy. And I was saying that, and I still maintain that Spain has to have as an ambition, not just wait for the others to lead, but to push. When it thinks it has to push, like it now thinks...
Which it did during the COVID crisis.
That's right. That's right.
With the recovery plan,
Recovery plan, or like we are doing now on energy. So the EU today is different. My sense is that the EU is different, that we need France and Germany, that they are an essential ingredient, they are necessary, they are not sufficient, and sometimes they have their own weaknesses and their own troubles. And therefore we have to make sure that we ignite all possible engines of leadership in the EU, obviously with a strong leadership from the institutions, from Ursula von der Leyen, from Josep Borrell, who's, in my view, also doing a very important job in advancing this common security and defense policy. But of course...
and do you feel this center of gravity shifting or not? Yeah, from the west to
It's very clear. It's very clear, and the war in the east brings the center of gravity even more so. It obliges all of us, first of all, to understand the east, something that in this part of the European Union maybe we were not this attentive to. So it has a virtue, you know.
No, I agree. This is another lesson. A lesson of the last 20 years, I would say, is that we didn't pay enough attention to those countries from Central Europe, to what they had been through, to the fact that they didn't have the same evolution as we did. Their societies were, of course, different. That was very obvious, but I mean, we discovered it in a way during the refugee crisis in 2015, 2016, when they refused to take refugees, quotas, they didn't want the quotas, and so. And of course, for us, it was shocking, but at the same time, we had to look at the fact that their societies were completely different from ours because they had never had massive immigration as we had. So, we had to learn the hard way that they were different, and we also didn't pay attention to their warnings about Russia. We dismissed their warnings, I think, too often, saying, "Oh, you're just Russophobic, and so it's your obsession." And now we see that mostly they were right. So I think, the pendulum is going to swing back a little bit, or to swing the other way, let's say. And I don't know about Spain, but for France and Germany, it's difficult. As you said, I totally agree with you. The Franco-German tandem is not enough. I don't think it's working very well. It's important. They have to work together, but definitely they have to take more around them and have closer cooperation with our partners. which is difficult apparently. I don't know what your experience was, but...
No, I mean, it's... you see, we have learned and lived the European Union integration through the eyes of France and Germany, and through the history of France and Germany in the 20th century. And it's important to realize that the 20th century was not very kind, not just to France and Germany, but it wasn't very kind to many other places in Europe. There is an amazing book that a colleague of yours, a journalist called Gerd Meck, wrote. It's called In Europe. And he took a bit like you, he took a year off, and he traveled around Europe. He went, he's a Dutchman. He went, he spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe. He spent a lot of time in Belarus and in Ukraine, trying to understand what happened there. The horrible consequences of the First and the Second World War in their territory, especially the Second World War. These were territories where genocide occurred in massive scale, where there was famine, where there was destruction, plunder, the whole catalogue of horrors of the 20th century. And I don't think we realize that this is now also part of the nightmare we have to share. Now, a question I would have for you, Sylvie, is, of course, this is what's happening in Ukraine. Again, war. Plunder, bombing, destroying, killing. What do you make of Putin's threat to use the nuclear weapon?
Of course, I don't know what he's going to do, but you know, he's a man of the Soviet Union. My instinct, whatever the instinct is worth for this kind of catastrophes, of potential catastrophes, but he's the man of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union had these nuclear weapons, but their leaders knew that they were not to be used, that this was a deterrence force and that they were not supposed to be used. And so I would think he knows, and he's just agitating this threat. But at the same time, he's also showed over the past years or past decade that he knows how to use terror as an instrument of power in Syria, in Chechnya, now in Ukraine. And so there are many instruments of terror now. I mean, there's the hybrid war, there's, So, I don't know, I think we have, I mean, it seems unimaginable to me, but I think we have to be prepared, I mean, we've had so many, you remember at the beginning of the war when the Americans and the British, but I guess the British had their intelligence probably also from the Americans, but were telling us everything which was going to happen, and we didn't believe it. All Europeans, I think, right?
That's right.
Yeah, we just didn't believe it because we thought it was not rational, because it was not in his interest, not in Putin's interest to do this, and we can see that it was not in his interest today. But so we thought he wouldn't do it, so I wouldn't bet that he will never do it either.
Yeah, and I wonder, you know, I agree with you. I mean, it would break the whole charm of, if I may, quote unquote charm of the nuclear weapon, which is it's only useful if you don't use it. The moment you use it, it stops being useful. But I also wonder how much countries that maybe Putin would listen to a little bit more than Europe or America, how comfortable they would feel with the use of nuclear. How comfortable would China feel? How comfortable would India feel?
Yeah, you're right.
How comfortable would Turkey feel? So I'm on this. I think it would be extremely helpful that we let others talk, that we prepare, that we be clear, to the extent that we can be clear, but that we let others talk. Because I do think that if there is one thing that Putin must calculate it, and it's coming back to haunt him, is the level of support, real support, not just not just words, but how much support he would have from countries around the world, including China, including India, including Turkey, that have been very clear as of late. So let's hope we don't have to cross that path.
Arancha,
Now,
go ahead. I think. No, go ahead.
No, I was looking at, we've been told that we have to look at the watch. And the watch is telling us que os tenemos que dar la palabra a todos vosotros.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
But it's
Muchas
been
gracias,
wonderful
Arancha.
to have, I have to say, thank you so much, Arancha. It was great.
Muchas gracias, Arancha. Muchas gracias, Sylvie. Hay bastantes preguntas. Vamos a ver si podemos organizarlas. Bueno, me acaban de llegar. Hay una que nos insisten en hablar más de geopolítica, y entiendo también que ahí nos hablan de la necesidad de hablar de los bloques, de los grandes bloques, y del papel de Europa dentro de estos grandes bloques. Hay una pregunta, podemos empezar con esta idea del papel de Europa dentro de estos grandes bloques, pero en concreto nos hablan también de si este repliegue, por ejemplo, europeo en el ámbito energético, la necesidad de ser más autosuficiente ahora con el problema con Rusia, no nos puede llevar, si no es solo en este ámbito, a un peligro de bloques autárquico al final. O sea, la gran China, que ella misma puede con todo, Europa puede con todo, Estados Unidos puede con todo, y las relaciones entre mundiales desaparecen. Y ahí una segunda pregunta sobre la eficacia de las instituciones que nos han regulado hasta hoy, más o menos pacíficamente, desde la ONU, la Organización Mundial del Comercio. Es decir, en esta nueva reorganización, si hablamos de la gran geopolítica, ¿qué papel hay Europa aquí? ¿Te parece?
Vale.
Empezamos por aquí y hacemos otras preguntas después.
Perfecto. ¿Sí? Vale. ¿Te importa si lo hago en español?
No, está bien.
Bueno,
Sí.
Los bloques. Es cierto que el riesgo, yo creo, no sé cómo lo ves tú, Sylvie, pero el riesgo que nosotros corremos ahora no es un riesgo de desglobalización, es un riesgo de fragmentación del sistema internacional, de fragmentación del orden internacional en torno a dos bloques normativos con sus propias reglas, con sus propias instituciones, sus propios procedimientos, porque esa fragmentación, en último término, lo que acarrea es empobrecimiento. La Organización Mundial de Comercio le ha puesto una cifra a la fragmentación, ha dicho que la fragmentación del comercio internacional, que es una de las partes del sistema internacional, supondría reducir el PIB mundial en un 5%. O sea que aquí el problema que tenemos y al que nos enfrentamos, y no creo que es tanto una cuestión de Rusia como una cuestión de China, es el riesgo de la fragmentación. Y por eso creo que necesitamos construir espacios de cooperación internacional, espacios donde, siendo muy conscientes que hay zonas en las que estamos en profundo desacuerdo con nuestros socios, con los países terceros, incluido con China, hay que buscar construir perímetros de cooperación también, de cooperación para descarbonizar, de cooperación para tratar de temas como la pandemia o la estabilidad financiera internacional. Entonces, el riesgo es claramente la fragmentación. El antídoto es buscar espacios de cooperación internacional, lo cual no es fácil, pero no creo que nada es fácil en estos momentos. No creo que esto deba ser un obstáculo para buscar realmente esa colaboración. Ocurrió en la Organización Mundial de Comercio en su conferencia ministerial en julio. La Unión Europea lideró que hubiera un acuerdo. Y China aceptó que hubiera un acuerdo. Pero aceptó que hubiera un acuerdo que no se le impusiera a China, sino que China voluntariamente lo aceptara. Entonces sabemos que si queremos una cooperación con un país llamado China, tenemos que respetar que él también, este país, tenga también algo que decir sobre cómo se ejerza esa cooperación internacional. Creo que la energía no es una cuestión de autosuficiencia. La energía es una cuestión de descarbonización. Y descarbonizar supone utilizar a término, nosotros nos hemos fijado para el 2050 descarbonizar completamente nuestra economía, queremos ser el primer continente en hacerlo. Eso supone, no se trata de autosuficiencia, se trata de fuentes de energía renovables. Y las fuentes de energía renovables pueden ser locales, la solar, la eólica, la hidro, pero puede ser también el hidrógeno verde que se produzca en Argelia, en Marruecos, y que llegue a España por un tubo como hoy llega el gas. O sea que la energía es otra cuestión. La energía es la descarbonización. Antes sabíamos que había que hacerlo rápido y con justicia. Hoy sabemos que la descarbonización hay que hacerla rápido, con justicia y segura. Porque tenemos un problema de seguridad de abastecimiento.
Yeah, I will just add one thing. I totally agree about the blocks, about this great power competition that we have in this geopolitical world. We don't know how it's going to end up after this war, because what will become of Russia? Will it still be a great power? And how will China, I mean, it's very much a world in flux at the moment. We have a multipolarity of, what will become of the China-America relationship after this? It will depend also on the position that China is going to have about Russia. So it's very, I mean, I would have a hard time telling you what will the world look like in 3 or 5 years. But I think Europe, yes, as we said, really have has very much at stake in this world, which is, trying to appear now. And it's for Europe to decide where it wants to stand, whether it wants to be a bloc of its own, whether it's going to. Now the pressure is going to be very strong to be even closer to the United States, because the United States is doing so much in this war. And it's interesting because President Biden, in fact, is a very pro-European president. So, but the war and the fact that the Americans have so much arms power is making Europe at the moment very dependent on the US. So can Europe wake up, as we have said earlier, to be a power of its own? This is the big, really the big challenge, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hay dos preguntas que van entrelazadas. Nos dicen, cuando habéis hablado de esta Europa de los 44, ¿no? Nos dicen, en esta Europa de los 44, ¿cuál sería el pegamento que va a unirnos? ¿No? Dicen, es la necesidad, como muchas otras veces, de una amenaza global hacia estos 44, digamos, o podemos dibujar algún tipo de atributos que puedan unirnos en estos 44, ¿no? Y esto va acorde con una segunda idea que nos dicen, bueno, si hacemos esta Europa más allá de la Unión Europea, ¿en qué va a tener que ceder la Unión Europea por lo que respecta, por ejemplo, a sus valores democráticos, solidaridad, etcétera? Es decir, ¿qué estamos dispuestos a construir para ser 44 y qué nos vamos a dejar en el camino, si es que nos tenemos que dejar en el camino, y cómo? Estas dos, ¿no? ¿Qué pegamentos, cómo lo hacemos? ¿Cómo vestimos estos 44?
I think I will let you answer this because you've been really working on this, but I'm sorry, we call this in French esprit d'escalier. Yeah? I'm thinking about something because there was in the previous questions there was something about the efficiency of the institutions, and something struck me, and you've addressed it a little bit, but something struck me in Putin's speech last week. That he said, you know, this international order that the West claims to protect, but where does it come from? Who was it negotiated with? And Russia is a millenary power, a great power, a millenary power, and we don't have to live by these rules. We will not live by these rules. But Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations, right, which is supposed to be a pillar of this That's international right. order. Right. So what, you know, of course we know that the Security Council is completely blocked and has been for quite some time because of the use of its veto by Russia. So, but I think this is really, and we've seen how weak it was during this crisis, the UN, unfortunately. So, yeah, this is something I think which is going to be a fundamental question. What do we do with the UN? You know, we know what we're going to do with NATO, which was supposed to be brain dead a couple of years ago, and now it's quite alive and kicking. But what will we do with the UN? I mean, it's a big question, and I will let you answer about the pegamento de los 44.
You know, let me first, you provoked me on that. NATO was brain dead, but what if in 2 years we've got Donald Trump back in the White House? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the organizations are fragile. Yeah. Because they are inhabited by governments, by countries. So the UN is fragile because the members of the organization today are in a flux. Mm-hmm. NATO may be fragile because its main stakeholder, its main shareholder, may just have a different view of what NATO should be about. So, you know, my sense is that if we are serious, we in Europe should build resilience. The lesson I take from all of this is that we have to build resilience, and this means investing in greater strategic capacity to decide on ourselves. And as the UN, as far as the UN is concerned, we have to invest much more, like Josep Borrell is doing now, to go and talk to countries, to reach out to them, to make them feel that we care about them, like Anna does, you know, in FIAP. Make sure that they understand that this is not fortress Europe, but this is Europe reaching out to others. Now, the glue that binds the 44, first I would say the EU is the EU, okay? And the EU has very clear rules of the game, and it's the Treaty on the European Union. Article 1 is about democracy, human rights, the rule of law. Then you've got countries that want to become members of the European Union. And the rules are clear. So it's just a question of how they walk towards that goal and how faithful we are in making sure they become a member when they meet the rules. And sometimes we are not very faithful, to be quite honest. But then the EU, the G44, the G-Europe, is an on top. Yeah. Now, what should be our ambition as Europeans should be that the glue that binds the G-Europe is economic progress, solidarity, and democracy. But we have to be ready to accept that this is the objective, that this is not the starting point, but that this is the goal we want to walk towards. Because we know that there are deficiencies. Now, frankly, there are also deficiencies within the EU. So my sense is this should be our goal, that this G-Europe is about economic progress, solidarity, and democracy, because this is what we are in the EU. But we have to be ready to accept that that's a journey. and that anyone that is part of the G-Europe wants to embark in this journey. That, in my view, should be the glue.
And I love this name of G-Europe. I think it's very good.
Unas preguntas concretas sobre un país dentro de estos bloques y sobre dos países. Digamos. Una concreta sobre Israel. Nos dicen cuáles son las implicaciones y el porqué de incluir a Israel en esta European Political Community.
¿Israel
Sí.
está? No está.
No está.
No.
Vale. La segunda tiene que ver con Inglaterra, con UK, más que Inglaterra, con UK. Nos dicen, es un bloque, ahora es como un mini bloque en sí mismo, digamos, en el espacio geoeconómico. ¿Cuál creen que será el papel de UK en relación a Europa y moviéndose en los grandes bloques, especialmente con Estados Unidos, una vez que ha acontecido el Brexit? ¿Qué vislumbran?
I can start with. I think they are realizing that their dream of global Britain, of being on their own, is really a dream, and that it's not going to happen, or it's too difficult, or too. At the same time, they have been very active on Ukraine and very good and very strong. Of course, there was some probably domestic politics involved, but still, I mean, since 2014, the British have started to train Ukrainian armed forces in 2014 after Crimea was annexed, and when this war started, I think about 25,000 Ukrainian soldiers had been trained by the British. And also they provided quite a lot of equipment also. So they've been very consistent, and I think this is something which will be taken into account after the war, so that they can play a role in the security of the continent. If there's a new order, a new security order which is built in Europe after this, the UK will be a big, important part of it, I think. And also, France has a very important bilateral relationship, of course, because we are kind of neighbors, but they had a very strong military cooperation. And I understand that now they're both sides are trying to rebuild or reconnect this relationship. So, you know, I'm hopeful that the British, but the problem is now they are in such a terrible situation. They first have to solve their economic situation. Their political situation is not, I mean, ours is not great either, but theirs is really complicated. So there's quite a lot of work to do, yeah.
Bueno, yo diría que el Reino Unido es un miembro permanente del Consejo de Seguridad de Naciones Unidas. El Reino Unido está en el G7, el Reino Unido está en el G20, el Reino Unido es una de las economías importantes, tiene el arma nuclear.
Sí.
Entonces, es cierto que este sueño británico de construir un polo británico no puede funcionar porque no tiene la escala en el mundo de hoy. Esta idea de ser un poco un actor ágil que es capaz de estar en todos los lugares a la vez, tampoco le da, porque hay que ser muy ágil para estar en todos los sitios a la vez. Y por eso yo creo que es importante la presencia de la primera ministra británica hoy en este G-Europa, es muy importante. Hemos entendido todos que el Reino Unido no quiere ser miembro de la Unión Europea. Está bien, pero no hace falta abandonar Europa. Entonces, démosles un nuevo lugar en el que ellos puedan participar a redefinir la seguridad, la defensa en Europa, porque ellos también son un país europeo. Yo creo que esa tiene que ser... es verdad que hay algunos lugares en Europa donde todavía hay ganas de castigar un poco al Reino Unido porque nos han hecho sufrir mucho rato con esto del Brexit. Pero yo creo que si somos maduros, y acá debemos de serlo, creo que esto tendremos que dejarlo atrás. Es el pasado. Vamos a intentar construir algo juntos, nuevo, diferente, mirando al futuro.
Brevísimamente, las dos últimas enlazadas, una que es más terminológica, nos hablan de la palabra de sanciones, que como sanción ya es un lenguaje agresivo, digamos, ¿no? Y si realmente nos aleja este lenguaje de las resoluciones que podrían ser más o menos compartidas. Y lo lío con otra que nos dice, al respecto del artículo 7 de la Unión Europea, cuando hay países, se ha hablado de aplicarlo en Hungría,
Sí.
etcétera, si el hecho de justamente no aplicar estas sanciones de forma más dura puede estar resquebrajando de alguna forma la Unión. Y ya.
It's an easy one. I don't know. I think it's so complicated, this issue, because we cannot. And actually, also we're coming back to the war all the time, but the war has changed the situation for Poland, and it's making it more difficult for the Commission now to strike, because Poland is performing very well, and not only is it's performing very well in the war, but it's very important as a hub for all the delivery of the equipment. I mean, it's really a major logistical place now for the war. I think all the equipment from America is flown to Poland, and then, you know, since the airspace over Ukraine is closed, everything goes by train and by road and so on. And also the fact that they have welcomed all those refugees. So it's such a tragedy, because Poland could be a major actor in Europe at the moment, in the European Union, if it behaved well. I mean, if it corrected its course on the rule of law. And there may be the temptation, I don't know what you think, Arancha, if there is really a temptation to give in and say, okay, you know, priority is to finish the war, and we'll let it go with Poland. I think it would be a major mistake, because if we start there, then we give in on everything.
No, yo creo, lo que creo es que tenemos que ser, o sea, yo no creo que podamos renunciar a defender la democracia en Europa. Esa es nuestra especificidad, somos el único lugar en el mundo capaz de sumar economía, solidaridad y democracia. No podemos renunciar a la democracia. Esto es una seña de identidad nuestra. Ahora, tenemos que ser inteligentes en cómo garantizamos el cumplimiento de todos los estándares democráticos en Europa. Y es ahí donde hay que utilizar el palo y la zanahoria de una manera muy fina, los italianos dirían con grande finezza, para conseguir no sancionar. Es verdad que esa palabra de sanción no tiene sentido, no es sancionar, es utilizar un palo que te permita avanzar hacia el cumplimiento de las reglas, que de eso se trata. Creo que yo lo vería así, igual tenemos que ser un poco más inteligentes en cómo usamos los instrumentos, pero yo no creo que podamos renunciar a el respeto de las reglas democráticas en Europa. Eso es Europa. Sin democracia seríamos como China. Economía y solidaridad. No somos como China, somos economía, solidaridad y democracia.
Pues yo creo que lo podemos dejar aquí. Arancha, Sylvie, muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos hoy. Sabemos del esfuerzo que habéis hecho para estar aquí y os lo agradecemos mucho en nombre de la Fundación Ernest Lluch, del Observatorio.
Gracias.
Y nos encontraremos la semana que viene, aquí también, para hablar de estrategias sostenibles de la financiación de la democracia. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.